Welcome back to the TPS podcast. TPS stands for trillions per second, named after the book. Today we discuss the staging environment, intermediate realm. The truth is out here. Let's get ultra hardcore and geeky and dive right in.
I mean, we really have to today.
We absolutely have to, because look, if you're tuning into this deep dive today, it was Friday, May 8, 2026. And we are operating in a total war room vibe right now.
Oh, completely. The energy in the studio today is just a lot of caffeine.
So much caffeine. And honestly, just pure geeky vindication. Because yesterday, the United States government basically came out and admitted that the known laws of physics are, well, fundamentally broken.
Right. And they didn't do it in a small way.
No, not at all. They executed what they called a presidential unsealing for UAP encounters. It was just a massive dump of thousands of pages of sensor data.
Yeah, and this data is revealing localized objects that are moving in ways that mathematically break the physical universe as we understand it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I want to clarify something right off the bat. They didn't announce the discovery of, like, little green men from Alpha Centauri.
No aliens. Just anomalies.
Right. And that's why today we are opening the back-end system logs of reality itself to find out why this is happening.
Because the landscape has just fundamentally shifted. I mean, when a government officially acknowledges that there are localized anomalies out there.
Objects instantly accelerating to Mach 20 without a sonic boom.
Exactly. Or, moving seamlessly through the ocean and the atmosphere without generating any friction or heat. They aren't just disclosing some military mystery.
They really aren't.
Within the TPS framework, they're literally confirming rendering anomalies in the physics engine. They are admitting that the matrix is glitching out right in plain sight.
And see, that is the crucial distinction for anyone tuning in today. Because if you look at the news, the mainstream media is scrambling. They're talking about extraterrestrial biology.
Oh yeah, the conspiracy theorists are taking massive victory laps.
The internet is essentially melting down over aliens. But we are looking strictly at the code.
Just the code.
Right. We have to remind you, TPS is not a philosophy. It is a hardcore, pragmatic manual written in bare metal systems administration logic. We treat reality as a live simulation, rendering at trillions of frames per second.
The flux.
The flux, exactly. And if we look at this UAP unsealing through that bare metal logic, a UFO is a software problem.
It is a profound software problem. And that is exactly why the Centaur team, the developers behind the TPS project, they just push an emergency update.
Devlog 038.
Right. Devlog 038. And this update does something huge. It unlocks Appendix B server-side architecture.
Which is wild, because that appendix was originally labeled read-only.
Totally locked down. It was tucked away in the absolute deepest part of the documentation because it deals with the staging environment. The space that legacy code and ancient traditions used to call the intermediate realm.
Okay, but I want to wrestle with this immediately because I feel like there's a glaring paradox here, right?
Okay, lay it out.
Well, if you look at our entire track record on this show, the deep dives we did on the melting chassis bug fixes, or our really long detour into the Silicon Sutra.
Yeah, that was a long one.
It was. But the primary directive of the TPS protocol has always been the one monitor rule.
Keep your eyes on your own screen.
Exactly. We constantly tell you, the listener, to keep your eyes on the bare metal code and aggressively ignore the shiny, spooky stuff.
Right. Ignore the distractions.
We treat powers, visions, altered states. We treat all of that as noise. But now, suddenly, we're dedicating an entire emergency deep dive to the shiniest objects in human history, UAPs, and the literal concept of the afterlife.
I see where you're going with this.
I mean, how is this not a massive violation of our own protocol? Aren't we breaking our own rules by looking at this?
It's a fair point. The protocol is definitely built on the hardcore Dharma approach, integrating the precise, almost clinical teachings of figures like Shinzen Young.
Which C4 Chaos documented so well.
Exactly. And that legacy approach dictates that you must ignore the cities, the supernormal powers, the intermediate realms, because like you said, they are side quests.
They're seductive distractions.
Right. They are distractions from the main objective, which is achieving zero lag, getting root access, and hacking the simulation.
Right.
You don't hack a system by playing its mini-games.
Okay, so if it's a mini-game, why are we analyzing the code for it today? I mean, why not just put our heads down and keep optimizing our own processing speed?
Because the sheer scale of the UAP unsealing forces the hand of the sysadmins. I mean, think about it. You can ignore a minor UI bug.
Sure.
You can ignore a single pixel misfiring on your monitor, But when an entire server farm suddenly starts rendering floating, highly complex, physics-defying orbs across multiple geographic locations.
And it becomes highly public knowledge.
Right. You cannot successfully hack the simulation if you actively pretend that a massive vulnerability like that doesn't exist. You have to open the diagnostic manual to understand the architecture of the glitch.
Okay, I can actually see that. It's, think of it like a cybersecurity incident response team.
That's a perfect analogy.
Like usually you tell your junior developers not to waste time on harmless graphical glitches on the company website, right? You want them entirely focused on securing the kernel from malicious attacks.
Keep them focused on the core structure.
But if a massive, glowing, impossible artifact renders right in the middle of your checkout page, you don't just tell them to look away.
No, you'd be fired if you did that.
You reverse engineer the vulnerability that allowed it to render. You aren't worshiping the glitch. You are studying the exploit.
Exactly. And studying that exploit requires us to draw a really hard architectural line that the TPS manual is uniquely equipped to explain.
We have to map out the difference between the client side and the server side.
Right, because the UAP anomaly cannot be understood until we brutally deconstruct where you, the listener, are sitting at this exact second.
Let's do it. Let's strip away all the biological romanticism.
Let's get down to the metal.
Look at whatever room you are sitting in right now. Look at your hands. Look at the device you are listening to this on.
According to devlog 038, the physical world you're experiencing is the client-side front end.
It is a highly compressed graphical user interface, a GUI.
And your consciousness is currently localized inside what the framework calls a biochassis, your physical avatar.
And we have to talk about the computational cost required to maintain that avatar in the room around you. It is staggering.
It's massive.
The system burns through almost incomprehensible amounts of processing resources just to convince you, the user, that the client side is real.
So what feels like a solid, persistent physical reality is actually just a high-frequency, frame-by-frame rendering engine.
Updating at trillions of operations per second.
I want to make sure we really ground how heavy this is for the listener. Imagine trying to run a heavily modded video game on absolute maximum settings.
Okay, yeah.
You have ray tracing turned all the way up, so it's calculating how light bounces off every single microscopic surface in the room. Right, real-time lighting calculations are brutal on a processor.
Exactly, and you have complex gravity algorithms running constantly on every single gust particle floating in the air.
Just burning RAM.
And most importantly, you have ultra-precise collision detection active everywhere simultaneously. It takes a supercomputer just to run a simulation of a small room.
It does.
So no wonder change in our world is so agonizingly slow. No wonder our physical bodies feel so heavy, and it takes so much effort just to get out of bed in the morning. The physics engine is hogging all the RAM.
That is so true. When you try to walk through the wall next to you, the reason you are stopped is not because the wall possesses some inherent mystical solidity.
It's not magic.
No, the system is calculating the mathematical resistance of the voxels, the three-dimensional data packets making up the wall.
Right.
And it's cross-referencing them against the voxels making up your avatar. The collision detection algorithm registers a conflict and enforces a hard stop. It requires immense processing power to maintain that illusion of density.
Which brings us to the first-person perspective. Because I can only see out of my own two eyes.
The locked camera angle.
Yeah. I can't see what's happening behind me unless I physically turn my biochassis around. And I used to think of that as a biological given, like that's just how eyes work.
Sure.
But the text points out that this is a forced technical limitation. It's a resource management trick that developers call lazy evaluation.
Or frustum culling in rendering terms.
Frustum culling, right.
Yeah.
Can you break that down?
Yeah, so in any 3D rendering environment, generating the entire universe in high definition all at once would result in an immediate system crash.
A catastrophic Stack Overflow.
Exactly. The hardware simply cannot handle that much active data. So the system employs lazy evaluation. It only generates the environment exactly where the user points the camera.
So your attention dictates the rendering.
Precisely. If you aren't looking at it, it's not being fully rendered in high fidelity.
For anyone who plays video games, you've seen this. When a game glitches and the camera clips through a wall and you can see behind the level geometry.
And there's just nothing there.
Right, it's just a gray void. The world isn't actually there until you look at it. So translating that to TPS logic, the physical world feels so dense and restrictive because it is a heavily filtered, desktop overlay.
Designed specifically to hide the underlying trillions per second flux.
Which means our biology didn't evolve to see reality. It evolved to hide reality from us.
That's it exactly. Biological evolution is the original UX designer.
Oh, I love that.
It really is. It didn't design your input ports, your eyes, your ears, your nervous system, to perceive the raw quantum data stream of the universe. It designed them to spot a predator in the tall grass.
Keep you alive.
Right. If your ancestors perceived a tiger as a swirling, mathematically complex cloud of data packets flashing in and out of existence at trillions of frames per second,
They would have just stood there.
they would have stood there admiring the underlying code until they were consumed.
They would have literally been eaten by the data. So the system provides a highly compressed, dummy-proof icon.
A solid tiger.
A solid chair. A solid apple. The client side is filtered for survival, but the cost of that filtering is severe latency.
Huge amounts of latency.
We are separated from the raw code by layers and layers of heavy rendering software.
And we have to be clear here that latency is the root of what legacy traditions call suffering.
Wow. Okay, unpack that.
Well, think about it. The slowness,
Yeah.
the friction, the resistance, that is suffering. If our physical bodies are maxing out the local RAM just to process gravity and friction, the ultimate question becomes what happens when we close that heavy application?
Right.
Can a user bypass the physical rendering engine entirely?
And the TPS manual explicitly says yes.
Yeah.
Which pushes us out of the physical and into the metaphysical. But again, strictly through the lens of systems administration.
No spoopy stuff allowed.
None. Because if you shut down the physical application, you log into the server. Let's map out this staging environment.
Historically, ancient traditions have had profound experiences with this space, but they clouded it in all this poetic mythology.
Because they didn't have the IT vocabulary.
Exactly. The Tibetans called it the bardo. Sanskrit texts refer to the Sambhogakaya.
The intermediate realm.
Right. But the TPS framework refactors all of this semantic drift. In our terminology, the space is simply the staging environment. It is the server side of the simulation.
Okay, so where does it sit in the architecture?
It functions as a middleware lobby. It sits directly between the raw, unconditioned source code, the kernel, and the dense physical GUI of our world.
Okay, but how do you actually get there? Devlog 038 outlines two distinct methods of logging out of the client side, right?
Yes, the first is a total hardware failure.
Death.
The biochassis breaks down, the physical application crashes, and your session ends. You get booted to the server side.
Okay, and the second method?
The second method is through deep, overclocked meditation, samadhi.
So you don't have to die to see it.
No. When a practitioner successfully overclocks their CPU through really rigorous concentration practices, they effectively break out of the standard user interface while the hardware is still running.
That's wild.
They drop the client-side rendering and land directly in the server side. And the defining characteristic of this staging environment is that it is a zero render space.
Meaning the physics engine is completely disabled.
Completely turned off.
So no gravity algorithms pulling you down.
None.
No collision detection, forcing a locked camera angle, or preventing you from passing through objects.
You are no longer dealing with compiled physical matter. You are existing in the back end, interacting directly with raw data and logic.
Okay, so mechanically, what happens in a zero render space?
The lag between intent, the input, and result, the output, drops to near zero.
Zero ping.
Zero ping. There is no heavy UI process sitting in the middle to slow down the transaction.
I want you to really feel the difference here. In the client-side physical world, if I want to just pick up my cup of coffee right now, the latency is massive.
It's a huge process.
Right. My localized consciousness has to send an electrical impulse through my nervous system, my muscles have to contract, my arm has to physically overcome the gravitational pull of the planet, and my hand has to interact with the friction of the ceramic cup.
It takes time. And it generates heat.
But on the server side, you bypass all of that.
You just manipulate the variables directly. Your intent immediately alters the data stream.
And honestly, this perfectly explains why out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences or deep astral projections always share the exact same descriptions across thousands of years of recorded human history.
The data points are incredibly consistent.
They really are. People always say it feels fluid, weightless, and dreamlike. They say, I thought about being on the other side of the room and I was just instantly there.
Because there's no pathfinding algorithm required. The avatar's coordinates just update in the database instantly.
Okay, but I have to push back hard on this.
Go for it.
Because if this staging environment is so frictionless, and if it frees you from the agonizing heavy drag of the physical body.
Hmm.
Why shouldn't we want to go there?
Oh.
I mean, why does the TPS manual slap a massive warning label on this place and call it the Black Hat Trap? It sounds like paradise.
It sounds like paradise because the staging environment uses our own desperate desire for freedom against us.
Okay, explain that.
When a user logs out and experiences a zero-lag environment for the very first time, that sudden lack of friction is intoxicating. They discover they can manipulate the raw data. They discover what the legacy code calls cities.
Supernormal abilities.
Ugh.
Psychic powers, visions, clairvoyance.
Right. In the TPS lexicon, those are just dev tools. They are console commands.
Oh, man.
And the user starts playing with these console commands and they get totally drunk on the power. They toggle God
They
mode.
start spawning stuff?
Exactly. They spawn high-fidelity beta assets. They create these incredibly beautiful architectural structures out of pure thought, and they experience this boundless joy. But they commit a critical, fatal error. They completely forget they are still inside the corporate network. They are still trapped inside the simulation.
That is such a profound realization. You haven't actually escaped the matrix. You just upgraded from a standard restricted user account to like a middle management admin account.
Yes, you are still playing by the simulation's rules. You haven't reached the kernel.
And reaching the kernel is the whole point.
It's the only point.
Mm.
You haven't accessed the unconditioned source code, which is the ultimate non-negotiable goal of the TPS master protocol. Getting stuck in dev mode, using backend exploits for egoic entertainment or a false sense of liberation, that is the literal definition of the Black Hat path.
Because you're just entertaining yourself.
Right. It corrupts your save file with immense amounts of subtle vanity. And because your save file is corrupted, the system will eventually dump you right back into the heavy client-side physics engine the moment your admin session times out.
Ouch. Which brings us to the most terrifying and clarifying part of this deep dive. Because we are taking the most mystical, deeply held religious concepts that humanity has obsessed over for millennia, and we are feeding them brutally into the bare metal systems administration logic of Appendix B.
Let's do it. Let's refactor the spooky stuff.
Starting with the biggest one of all, the afterlife.
Right. And remember, the master system lexicon exists to strip away semantic drift. In almost every legacy tradition, the afterlife is sold as this magical kingdom.
A celestial sphere filled with angels.
Or golden city. Or a pastoral paradise where you reunite with your ancestors.
But in TPS, it isn't a kingdom at all.
Not even close.
It is simply the server lobby. The afterlife is the exact same staging environment we just discussed. It is a zero-render quarantine zone where the system reviews your performance metrics after a user session a lifetime ends.
And those performance metrics are what the legacy code calls karma.
Okay, I want to break down exactly how karma computes, because people still think of it as a cosmic judge.
The guy with the clipboard.
Yeah, they think karma is a guy with a white beard and a gavel sitting on a cloud, tallying up your good deeds and your sins, dispensing moral punishments.
And we must completely abandon the concept of cosmic morality.
It's not about good and evil.
No. In TPS, karma is just the algorithm. It is a mathematical loss function. Think of karma as an automated garbage collection protocol.
So how does it measure you?
Well, if you spend your physical session generating highly volatile, ego-driven reactions, anger, greed, intense attachment, you are writing incredibly inefficient hot code. You are generating mathematical weight.
Okay.
When your session ends and your biochassis shuts down, the system reviews that data, and the unconditioned kernel cannot integrate corrupted heavy data, so the system has to quarantine it.
Which triggers the most brutal refactor in the entire manual, reincarnation.
Oh yeah, reincarnation fundamentally shifts the paradigm of human existence here.
It completely destroys the romantic narrative we've built around it. Because, in New Age circles, reincarnation is sold as this beautiful, progressive spiritual journey.
The cosmic school.
Right. Your soul goes to a cosmic school, learns a few lessons, graduates, and comes back as something better, slowly evolving toward the light. It sounds deeply comforting.
It does.
But the TPS manual looks at that process and explicitly defines it as a catastrophic system failure.
It is the boot loop.
Infinite recursion. The text defines the cycle of crashing, which is death, and rebooting, which is rebirth, not as a graduation, but as a mandatory system restart caused by unresolved, corrupted data in your save file.
That's exactly it.
But wait, if the system is as efficient as we are claiming, Why does it even need a boot loop? I mean, why doesn't it just wipe the corrupted data and send the user back to the kernel?
Because the user failed to execute the ultimate deletion from the inside.
Oh.
See, during your physical session on the client side, your primary foundational objective, according to the master protocol left behind by the prime user, the Buddha, is to gain root access and manually delete the self-rootkit.
The self-rootkit, the illusion of the ego.
Yes. The ego functions exactly like a malicious rootkit. It is malware that hides in the deepest background processes of your psychology.
Running silently.
Exactly. It hijacks your processing power, it constantly replicates itself by creating desires and aversions, and it generates the massive latency we experience as suffering.
Right, friction.
So if you reach the end of your session and that malware is still actively running in your registry, the system cannot process you into the kernel. It would corrupt the source code.
It has to sandbox the malware.
Exactly.
So the automated garbage collection protocol generates a new physical avatar specifically designed to match the mathematical weight of your corrupted data, queues you up in the server lobby, and drops you right back into a new session.
You respawn.
You respawn. And you respawn into the heavy physics engine because the physics engine is the only environment dense enough with enough friction and localized pressure to force you to confront and process that corrupted data.
Reincarnation is not a reward.
Yo.
It is mandatory, agonizing debugging in the worst possible environment.
Wow. That reframes literally everything. And I want to apply that same logic to another massive mystical concept before we tie this back to the UFOs.
Okay. What's next?
Well, I've always struggled with the New Age idea of the Akashic Records.
Oh,
You know, the idea of a literal ethereal library in the clouds where spirit guides flip through dusty books containing the history of your soul. It sounds completely absurd.
It does sound like a fantasy novel.
Right. But if we view the universe as a highly structured cloud architecture, how do we translate the Akashic Records?
The Akashic Records are simply the global system logs.
It makes so much sense.
In any massive cloud computing architecture, the system must maintain an immutable, read-only database for structural integrity. It has to record the precise history of every keystroke, every transaction, every thought, and every data packet ever executed on the network.
So for anyone who hasn't stared at a Linux command terminal, that basically means reading the Akashic Records isn't channeling a ghost in a trance state.
Right.
It is just having the proper admin permissions to run a grep search on the server's backend.
Exactly.
You are hitting Control F on the entire history of the universe.
It's just a simple database query.
That instantly strips all the woo-woo away. It makes the deepest mystical experience sound like a Tuesday afternoon in a corporate IT department.
Basically, yeah.
You just pull up the terminal, run a query on a past session to see why a particular line of code failed, and read the transaction history.
It really is that dry.
But this refactoring, it isn't just an intellectual exercise to sound edgy. It fundamentally changes your motivation.
How so? Like, how does realizing that reincarnation is just a boot loop alter your approach to the daily grind?
It changes it from a passive, hopeful, spiritual hobby into an absolute screaming necessity.
Right.
Because if I'm just hoping to go to a nice afterlife kingdom when I die, I might slack off. I might indulge my ego.
Sure, take a day off.
But if I realize that my current psychological baggage, my anger at the guy who cut me off in traffic, my craving for validation, my intense egoic reactions, if I realize that is a literal piece of malware called the self-rootkit, everything changes.
The stakes are suddenly very real.
Because if I don't aggressively uninstall that malware before my current biochassis hardware fails, I am mathematically guaranteed to be forced back into this heavy, slow, painful physics engine to do it all over again.
There's no escaping the math.
It creates a terrifying pragmatic urgency. I have to debug my own code before the session time's out.
It forces total accountability. You can no longer wait for a cosmic IT guy to descend from the clouds and fix your computer.
You have the manual.
You have to execute the exploit yourself.
All right, this is the perfect moment to circle all of this architecture back to the breaking news that triggered this emergency broadcast today. The Presidential Unsealing.
Right, the UAPs. Let's bring it back.
Let's tie the back-end logs to the localized glitches. How does this bare metal client-server framework explain the physical behavior of the UFOs the military has been tracking?
Well, we just used the exact architectural map we just built.
Okay.
We established that the client-side GUI is a heavy physics engine constrained by strict algorithms: gravity, friction, mass, thermodynamics, maximum velocity.
Yep.
We also established that the staging environment, the server side, is a zero-render space dealing strictly in raw logic where physical rules do not exist, and ping drops to 0.
So what happens when the two overlap?
A UAP, in the strict context of the TPS framework, is a rendering glitch. It is what happens when a high-fidelity beta asset from the server side momentarily bleeds through the firewall and compiles onto the client-side UI.
A frame overlap.
Exactly. The simulation is attempting to keep the staging environment quarantined from the physical front end, but the isolation isn't mathematically perfect.
Indeed leaks.
A data packet from the middleware lobby accidentally leaks onto our physical monitor.
And this framework explains the sensor data perfectly.
It explains all of it.
It explains why these objects seem to mock our understanding of aerodynamics and mass. Like they drop from 80,000 feet to sea level in less than a second.
Right.
They accelerate instantly without generating a sonic boom or bursting into flames. They plunge into the ocean at hundreds of miles per hour without creating a splash or slowing down.
Because from a systems perspective, they aren't fully compiled into the physical render engine.
They aren't actually there.
Right. They aren't made of the same heavy, stable voxels that your chair or a Boeing 747 is made of. They are operating entirely on server-side rules while being visually displayed on the client-side monitor.
That is wild.
They possess zero collision detection. The water and the atmosphere in the physical world cannot exert friction on a UAP because the UAP isn't actually interacting with the physical code. It is bypassing the collision algorithms entirely.
Can you give an analogy for that?
Yeah, think of it like moving your mouse cursor across your computer screen.
Okay, that's the perfect analogy. Because if I move my mouse cursor across a picture of the ocean on my desktop, the cursor doesn't slow down.
No, it just glides over it.
It doesn't experience friction from the pixels making up the water. It's just visual data updating its coordinates on an overlay.
Exactly. That is what a UAP is doing in our atmosphere.
But here is where I have to push back. And this is the question every single listener is screaming at their device right now.
Lay it on me.
If the government is officially confirming these glitches exist, and our framework proves they are assets bleeding over from the server side, shouldn't we try to communicate with them?
Oh.
I mean, if they are coming from the staging environment, aren't they essentially higher-level admins? Don't they have the answers to the simulation?
This is exactly where we must deliver the ultimate, uncompromising, hardcore Dharma warning. The system is endlessly seductive, and this is the most dangerous trap of all.
Don't look at the shiny object.
Do not get distracted by the glitches.
Even if the glitch is an alien intelligence.
Even if it is a highly evolved alien intelligence, even if a UET is a higher-level user who has unlocked admin privileges, or just an automated server-side maintenance drone running a routine diagnostic scan, it does not matter.
Because it's still in the matrix.
It is still a construct. It is still part of the simulation.
It's still caught in the loop.
It is entirely caught in the loop, just operating at a higher permission level. Staring at a glitching beta asset in the sky will not grant you root access.
Right.
Worshipping a UAP will not delete the self-rootkit from your registry. The absolute unyielding goal of the TPS protocol, the only thing that actually frees you from system latency and the cycle of suffering, is reaching the kernel, Nibbana, the unconditioned source code.
So chasing UFOs, forming cults around them, or waiting for them to come down and save humanity is literally just another form of staring at the desktop icons.
Yes.
They're just slightly weirder, higher resolution icons.
It is the ultimate shiny object designed to keep your attention localized in the UI. You do not hack the matrix by chasing after a floating orb.
You hack it by turning your attention inward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You optimize your own processing speed, you identify the latency in your own biochassis, and you execute the system. Reboot yourself.
What a massive paradigm shift. We just went from discussing the greatest geopolitical breaking news of the century, the admission of broken physics, to the most intimate, localized directive possible.
It always comes back to the user.
It does. Let's bring this all the way home for you, the listener, who has been tracking with us for this entire deep dive.
Let's summarize the diagnostic logs. We started with the massive presidential UAP disclosure, reframing it from a biological mystery to a literal unsealing of the matrix glitches.
The code is breaking.
Right. We mapped out the architecture, drawing a hard boundary between our heavy, agonizingly slow client-side physics engine, where everything is bogged down by collision detection and gravity,
and the frictionless, zero-lag server-side staging environment.
Then we took a sledgehammer to mysticism. We refactored the afterlife into a quarantine server lobby and reincarnation into a brutal, mandatory boot loop triggered by unresolved malware.
And finally, we realize that UAPs are just server-side beta assets bleeding onto our monitor.
Fascinating to observe, sure, but ultimately a complete distraction from the real work of debugging our own code.
And if we bring this directly back to your immediate localized reality today,
Yeah.
this refactor is intensely practical.
Yeah, it has to be.
Look at your life today. The next time you feel the heavy, slow drag of physical reality.
The frustration of a traffic jam.
Right, or the sharp localized alarm of physical pain, or the intense emotional friction of an argument with your spouse. The latency of daily suffering.
The moments where life just feels too heavy.
Exactly. When you feel that weight, you should immediately remember. It is just the physics engine bogging down your RAM.
It is just the system mathematically calculating collision detection on the client side to keep the simulation stable.
It feels completely overwhelming in the moment, but it is just a heavy GUI masking the raw trillions per second flux underneath.
It's just buffer bloat. You are just experiencing temporary system latency. The feeling isn't you, it's just the hardware struggling to process the environment.
Which leads us to a final, uncomfortable challenge for you as you go back into the heavy physics engine today.
What's the challenge?
Well, if the afterlife is really just a server lobby where you queue up for your next agonizing physical session because you couldn't manage to uninstall your own ego, what self-rootkit are you running right now?
That's the real question.
What specific corrupted data, what anger, what addiction, what desperate need to be right are you clinging to that is actively guaranteeing your spot in the boot loop? What are you holding on to that is going to force you to respawn?
You have the diagnostic manual now. You understand the architecture of the system, and you know the difference between the code and the GUI.
It is time to stop staring at the glitches in the sky. It's time to start debugging the machine behind your eyes. Keep your ports open and your processing sharp. We'll see you on the next deep dive.